Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Motivate Mix interviews brought to you by Motivate Magazine, which is a global online business publication with an international readership. As usual, if you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. My name is Kadian. I am known as the divorce and separation coach for women, and I will be representing Motivate Magazine today. So welcome, everybody. Our guest today is Dean Palfreyman from Primal Nutrition and Fitness, and he's written an article titled Embracing Fat. Dean is a fitness specialist who's taken the holistic approach to health and fitness and lifestyle. So Dean, welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm really well. Thank you. You good?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. It's really appreciated, especially.
No problem.
And just tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Primal Fitness.
Well, the fitness industry I've been in for nearly 18 years, and I did things the way you'd be traditionally taught back when I first started, and that was to exercise more, eat less calories, particularly reducing your fat, and you'll be fit and healthy, and the rest will be history. You don't have to worry about anything else. And that's the way I was trained to do things. Yeah. So back when I started, that's what I used to do with clients. And back then, although we were getting some results, realistically, I wasn't getting the results I was expecting. So I was probably doubting myself when I think back, because was I a bad trainer? There's always that chance with the people lying to me about when I say, how's your diet been? Have you been exercising this week? You know, possibility. But actually, it wasn't until around 7-8 years ago now when I had what I class as my light bulb moment, where actually I realized the two things actually aren't true. It was more a case of the advice I was giving was flawed in many respects.
Okay.
And the reason I've come to that conclusion now is what I now do from a more ancestral approach to health and fitness, looking at how our bodies have evolved to eat, how our bodies have evolved to move, and actually how our lifestyles are a completely different thing to what we are supposed to be doing compared to what the modern world is. And that's the basic premise of how I approach things nowadays.
So give me a breakdown, because you mentioned ancestral approach. Tell me a little bit about that, please.
Well, genetically, we are the same as we were 200,000, 250,000 years ago at the dawn of modern man.
Right.
So when we became Homo sapiens, we had millions of years of evolution, different tangents of sapiens, but we became Homo sapien around 200,000 years ago. We're genetically the same now as we were then. And we live for the majority of our life over the millennia, up until around about 10 or 12,000 years ago as hunter-gatherers. We lived on what was around in our surrounding environment. We'd hunt, we'd fish, we'd find nuts, berries, seeds, dig things out of the ground. We'd only have the food availability that was there, growing naturally or living naturally. Take that then as a time frame, 200,000 years, and then 10 or 12,000 years of agriculture. So that was when we estimate the agricultural revolution began, when we basically started to become more settled and started to produce crops, particularly things like wheat and different grain-based food. So at that point, we actually see a decline in our health from around 10 or 12,000 years ago, when we went from this hunter-gatherer nomadic lifestyle to more settled. Now, it has allowed us to become the people we are now, because it allows us to feed a lot of people. You can keep people alive with it, but we didn't thrive, and we don't thrive on it now, although that's actually become the foundation of our dietary guidelines, and that is grain-based food. So if you look at the My Plate or the old food guide pyramid, you'll see it's based on starch, carbohydrate-based food, breads, pastas, white potato, and so on. Then you've got fruit, vegetables, meat and protein, and fat at the top. Well, actually, I recommend we flip that the other way around. Our bodies are very good at using fat, hence my article.
Right. So you sort of look on my face, because you know, just much like you've mentioned, when you first started, you were told, you know, exercise more, reduce the calories and fat intake and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure there'd be people on here thinking, what on earth are you talking about in terms of taking more fat? I can't shift the fat that I'm already carrying on a day-to-day basis. So I know in your article, you mentioned that there's good fat and there's bad fat. For those that maybe don't know where to look, or you know, finding it hard to process that information, tell us the difference between good and bad, and where can we find the fats that are good for us?
Right. So before we go actually into the what are good and bad, there's actually a lot of conflicting things out there regarding what we class as good fats, bad. So we've heard of saturated fat. That's the devil of all fats, as we supposedly. Then you've got monounsaturated, you know, the variations of what people look at. What I don't want to really dwell on is the types of individual fats, saturated, unsaturated, and so on.
Yeah.
But what I do want people to take on board is actually where the fat comes from, is the bigger picture.
Right.
So if we use my ancestral template as ancestral man, hunter-gatherer man, we'll be getting naturally occurring fats in our diet. So that would be from animal fats, the fat they get from what we've hunted, from fish. The fats occurring in nuts and seeds. More modern day, I'm not, it'd be an interesting thing for me to look into actually how old an avocado is, as far as the would hunter-gatherer man have found that. I think it's more of a modern type of fruit, really. But you know, they're the naturally occurring fats which are good for our bodies. The problem that's happened is that a lot of the fat in our diet is industrial processed vegetable oils.
Right.
And there's a big difference between a vegetable oil, which sounds healthy, remember, because vegetables are healthy. Funnily enough, vegetables haven't got oils in them in their own substrate. We take them from the seeds from the vegetables. In order to get hold of these industrial processed vegetable oils, so when I say that, we're talking about standard vegetable oil, canola oil, rapeseed oil, all of the ones that are vegetable based. They go through a huge amount of process to get them there. You can't just take sunflower seeds and squeeze them and get sunflower oil. You have to put them through a huge mechanical process. A lot of that is high heat. And this is where the science gets a little bit more deep. When we heat an oil, it creates free radicals. You've probably heard of free radicals before. We want to get antioxidants to remove free radicals from our system, right. But they also change the omega profile within the fat itself. So you've heard of omega 3, 6, and 9, I assume.
Yeah.
We should have an equal balance, really, of omega 3 to 6 in particular, of around 1 to 1, 1 to 2. In a modern diet context, it's closer to 1 to 20, 1 to 25. So that ratio is totally askew. So we can see why we have metabolic issues coming from the bad fats. One of the other problems, not only from the high heat, is actually to make these oils look palatable, they're quite often bleached. That'll be one of the last processes. So when you look at the oil before it gets actually put into that bottle, you really wouldn't want to be eating it. So they bleach it. So you can see where there's lots of things that go wrong just to get hold of a vegetable-based oil, which sounds healthier. We won't go too deep into the conversation regarding money, but it's also very cheap to make. So there's a lot of obviously money within the food industry, and the cheaper you can make a product, the bigger profits you're going to get. So it makes sense that that's pushed. Whereas naturally occurring fats, so this takes us back to the original question, fats occurring within meat, within fish, within nuts and seeds and so on, they are actually really good at nourishing your body. And your body's very good at using fat as a fuel source if it's allowed to. Now, when I say if it's allowed to, that is in the context of you have to reduce sugars and particularly refined carbohydrate from your diet to allow your body to burn fat efficiently.
And refined carbohydrates are, sorry, explain that for us.
Refined carbohydrates, things generally made with grain, so bread, pasta, cakes, cookies, all of the things that we know aren't good for us, even no matter what dietary approach, and love, yes. That's what I'll class as a refined carbohydrate. Carbohydrate as a whole isn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it comes down to the source. So if we're getting carbohydrate from sweet potatoes, butternut squash, at the end of the day, broccoli is carbohydrate once we've digested it. It's a totally different thing again to what bread, pasta, and so on are. The way the effects of the body, the glycemic rise, how quickly our blood sugars rise in response to a type of food is a really important point. So yeah, these refined, anything that has a process to make it, I would put it under the refined carbohydrate label.
So I wanted to ask you, because we spoke about oil and the process of making that, and then the final step is bleaching it and everything. So we know that using the oven is traditionally better for you than frying on top of on the hob, the stove. So what if someone does like to have the occasional fried chicken or fried like breaded mushrooms or something like that they want to kind of just deep fry or whatever the case is there a form of oil that is probably preferable over another, or is this just once they get heated past a certain point and because of how they're made, it's all not good for you? What's the stance on that?
Right, so if I was going to deep fry anything, I'd use lard.
Oh, that's old school.
Yeah, old school, absolutely. Yeah, lard is a naturally occurring fat. It's pig fat. It's rendered down pig fat at the end of the day. You can also use tallow, which is beef fat if you get hold of it. That's what I'd use if I was going to deep fry something. Interestingly, you said somebody want breaded mushrooms. I wouldn't have a problem with the mushroom, but maybe not so the bread on top, because that was obviously adding that refined carbohydrate to the good stuff. So yeah, if I was going to deep fry, I'd use that. Frying in any naturally occurring fat's fine. So you can get avocado oil now. Again, you pay a premium for it, and that's the annoying thing. Quite often, to be healthier, you do have to sometimes invest a little bit more on the site. It's not always the case, but in that respect, you can shallow fry with olive oil. However, it's important to remember that olive oil has got a low smoke point. So once it gets to a point of you actually see smoke or it's bubbling away, you should probably get rid of that, because that, again, we spoke earlier about free radicals. It raises free radicals and it becomes rancid. And there's some links to carcinogenic properties as well. So if you're cooking with olive oil, keep it at low temperature.
Yeah.
Olive oil is really good for you overall. Again, naturally occurring from olives. It's better used as a cold dressing though on salads and things like that. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so just so we spoke about lard and you spoke about beef fat, but for anyone that's vegan or vegetarian, they could go for avocado oil.
Absolutely, it could do, yeah. Avocado, they could use olive oil as well. You can get other types of nut oils as well. So you can buy walnut oil and almond oils as well. Yes.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. So I'm very interested in this topic, and I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in it as well, because there's so many diets out there. You get so much mixed information. It could just be so overwhelming. But just taking into account, so you have the information, and there's people like yourself that provides nutritional information for people to process and kind of use as a guide to their nutritional intake. Now tell us, because it's not one size fits all, is it?
No.
Everybody's body is different, we process things differently, metabolisms are different and everything like that. But so what are some of the signs that people can look out for or use that in their daily lives, that they can tell that something probably don't agree with them, or they're not digesting something right, or something works better for them than another product? Is there, I mean, again, I know it's not a one size fits all thing, but are there common things to look out for that a particular thing that you're putting in your body, whether it's natural or processed, is not good for you?
Right. Well, we'll start from the red flags, as I call them. So whatever dietary approach people take, the red flags are always sugar-laden junk foods.
Mm-hmm.
They make people feel good at the moment of having them, but actually the long-term effects of actually how people feel, and they don't even realize they're feeling it because they're living with it daily. Mm-hmm. The tiredness, the feeling lethargic, the not having any energy to get up, so you need more sugary stuff to get any kind of energy going. That's a good sign actually that you're a sugar addict. At the end of the day, you need this high octane fuel. So that's always top of the list, no matter which approach we're looking for.
Yeah.
A little bit more nitty gritty. When I set I have a template that I work from. It's an important point to make. You said there's no one size fits all, but I do start from a basic template. That template looks pretty simple when you're from the face of it, and that is basically what I've said: hunter-gatherer type of food, meat, fish, eggs, fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds. That's, in a nutshell, no pun intended, is the basic template. But what we're removing from when we do that is we remove the refined carbohydrates I've just mentioned, so things like breads, pastas, and so on.
Right.
There's a lot of issues that come alongside with grain. Gluten being one of them. So you probably heard of gluten intolerance.
Yes.
There's there's a spectrum of what people can tolerate. Far end of intolerance being celiac disease, obviously very dangerous. But I think there's a level where everybody has a certain degree of gluten intolerance within us, because we're not designed to eat gluten. Using this ancestral template, we haven't really had gluten in our diet for more than 10,000 years. So our bodies haven't adapted. So I find that when we remove that, so grain-based food top of the list, people see a lot of good results. They suddenly feel more energetic, their brain is a bit more firing more efficiently, digestive systems disappear. Grain-based food is also pro-inflammatory, so things like arthritis, aches and pains in joints and so on can also dissipate with removing gluten from the diet. The same is true for dairy products. So dairy can be a good source of nutrition if you can tolerate it. So from the start, what I recommend most people do is a 3-week reset where we take dairy out of the diet. So anything from cheese, yogurt, butter, if it's dairy sourced, we get rid. And we go for that 3-week period as a minimum. And people sometimes really feel massive changes from the start, but there's not so much. But when we start to reintroduce dairy further down the line, that's when we start to see if there's any problems. So people living with this kind of niggly, achy stomach every day, thinking, oh, that's just the norm. Or
Yeah.
are they constantly congested or claggy throated? That's another sign that there's potential lactose intolerance from the dairy. I've had real cases in the past. There was a lady that worked with me 3 or 4 years ago now. She had chronic hip and shoulder pain to a point where she could hardly swim anymore, which is what she loved doing, on ibuprofen every day. Had blood tests, you name it, they'd done the full works of the doctors. And all it took was to remove dairy from the diet, and the pain went away within a few days.
Really?
And yes, yeah, absolutely. So her choice, she had a lifestyle choice then. She loved her dairy, but she hated the pain. So what do you want more? She didn't want the pain anymore, so the dairy had to go. So yeah, that's always two kind of things that are usually in people's diets, which actually I think most people should at least look to remove for a small period of time at least, to see if you get any effects. And even if you don't see the effects at first or feel the difference, when you put them back in, that's when you start to notice them.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting because I recently started to listen to my body, which probably sounds like it's just been years of ignoring what it's been telling me. And I've realized that there's certain things that just makes me feel horrendous. For example, like white rice and pasta. Now, those were sort of staple and working full time, being a mom, and these are easy to go to things. So are there any sorts of, I know you've mentioned things like sweet potato that are natural carbs. Are there any sort of natural things that are easy to look after that could give people that balance of, not spending too much time in the kitchen, and it could be a staple in the house? Is there any substitute pastas or anything you could substitute for rice, for example?
Well, there's always substitutes, definitely. Rice is an easy one, actually, to use cauliflower rice. If you've ever tried that, you can, excuse me, you can buy it pre-done, but I'd recommend that you make it yourself. The pre-done stuff is always in a bag. You microwave it, just turns to mush. But the way to do that is to get whole cauliflower, cut it in half. Nice, quick, easy way of doing it is just to grate it on a cheese grater. If you want to be more time-consuming but make it a lot more rice-like, and put it into a food processor and just blitz it up. and then you just pan fry that just to warm it through. I like to pan fry it a bit of butter personally, but you can use any other type of quality oil, just enough to warm through. You don't want to cook it too much because it goes soft, but it still gives you that texture and that bite that you get from rice.
Yeah.
Pasta is a little bit more difficult, but there are alternatives. So courgette is a good one to use. So use just a peeler and almost ribbon it along all the way around and keep going until you get to the center. That gives you kind of, I suppose, a tagliatelle kind of effect. The only thing I will say that if you take that on board is that courgette holds a lot of water. So once you've cooked it and warmed it through, let it drain through a sieve for a few minutes before you serve it. Otherwise, you just end up with a bowl of water as well.
Okay, and that's practical stuff there for you. And we're good with protein, right? It's that, I guess that's in balance. So people that do eat meat, they can get that chicken, I guess, fish for your omegas, red meat.
Yeah.
So we're kind of good with that. Obviously, does it depend on how you cook it also?
Rephrase that. So what do you mean?
So like meats. So with meat products like chicken, fish, red meat, or pork for those who eat it. I guess those are good for you in moderation, but does it also depend on how you cook it?
Oh, well, it's interesting fact, actually, regarding how you cook. So, all meat's on the menu as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Everybody has their own tolerance to how much they enjoy, what they don't enjoy. But actually, the cooking of meat is really important for nutrient bioavailability. We often overlook the term bioavailability because what that means is how much of the nourishment you get from that product, and this is whatever it may be, you actually absorb into the system. Now, the process of cooking breaks down the proteins within the meat product itself, allowing them to be more absorbed. So actually the cooking processes are really, from an ancestral point of view, from our evolutionary point of view, there's a lot to be said about the advent of fire when we started to cook. There's quite a lot of theories that was what allowed our brains to become bigger, to allow us to become where we are. I digress there, sorry. But a cooking scale, so let's take a steak, for example. If you undercook, you're not going to absorb as much as if you allow some more heat through. Right. On the flip of that, if it goes too far, so if you go into a kind of well done type of steak, you actually start to break it down so much that you don't have as many nutrients left. So a perfect medium rare steak, I would suggest, would be where you want to be aiming for the bigger nutrient density. Things like chicken, obviously, turkey, they need to be cooked through. Don't be going pink with those things because of the potential dangers. But yeah, pink red meat is fine.
Okay, well, thank you for that because, and I hope that helps a lot of people who are wondering, trying to find a balance between not, overdoing their steak, and not only is it probably like rubber, but also not getting any nutritional value out of it. So I think that will be very, very helpful. I think I've just got one question for you, which I think I really know the answer anyway, but I'm going to ask. So Dean, should we embrace fat?
Yes, we should. assuming we have the correct source of fats.
Okay, that's fantastic. So don't be too worried about it. Just make sure it's the right source. We're getting it from the right places. And just know our bodies and know how that's working also.
Absolutely, yeah. The source of fat is much more important than the lack of fat.
Okay, there you go. So is there any like wise words, anything that you really want to say to anyone that's watching this that you think maybe not, I will say life-changing, or may give them a different perspective or something to ponder on?
Shall I give you my top 3 tips?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so number 1, cut sugar and refined foods out of your diet. Top of the list every single time. For whichever dietary approach you come from, sugar is always number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2, include quality fats in your diet. Mm-hmm. They are what are going to fill you up. They taste good, and they're also what are going to nourish you in the absence of the sugary stuff. When you allow your body to use them as a fuel, you have to get rid of the sugary stuff first. And then third, it's a bit more off topic, but regarding our movements, our exercise modalities, you haven't got to always pick these hour or hour and a half slots 3 to 4 days a week. Move more regularly throughout the day and it all adds up. So small snippets always count towards a bigger picture. So, we're trying to always schedule in, I need to go to the gym at 5 o'clock this evening. Life gets in the way. But throughout the working day, you just do 10 squats, sit down, have a cup of tea, do a bit more work, get up again, do another 10 squats. And by the end of the day, you've done 100. As a very simple example. But more movement, more often, is better than having to get these individual segments. We have to mitigate our lack of movement in the modern world with the gym environment and sporting activities. Whereas, again, coming back to my ancestral approach, we're designed to move all day, every day in lots of varying terrain, lots of varying movements. So, yeah, the top 3.
Thank you so much. And those are 3 very good tips, especially the last one about moving more regularly. It doesn't have to be a whole task, scheduling that time and drumming up the motivation for the end of the day. So I appreciate that one. And I hope the viewers watching today appreciates that. So thank you so much, Dean. It's been absolutely fantastic having you. And thank you for contributing that article to Motivate Magazine. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. No problem.
Okay, so if you'd like to find out more about what Dean has to say about that, you can always go back to our Motivate magazine. You can visit us at motivatemagazine.com. That's M-O, the number 2, vatemagazine.com. Or if you'd like a sense of community, please, as usual, you can always join the Motivate Facebook group. And again, that's M-O, the number 2, Vate magazine, and request to join. So for fantastic sense of community, thank you so much again, Dean. It's been really, really great. And I'll see you on the other side.
Okay, thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.